Okay, so this panel, breakthrough or breaking things. The way that this panel originated was Chris, one of our panelists who will introduce himself momentarily, went to Linda and was like, hype. I've been in a hype cycle before, and what is going on? And Linda's like, well, that's a perspective that needs to be heard.
Yeah.
We might not end up having. We'll see. We'll get there. We'll ad lib this. Okay. So anyway, so that's how this started, and we decided that it was Linda decided, of course, because she's the decider. Perfectly clear accountability around here. That we would have a spicy panel and try to present some different perspectives. And so because I don't have the power to set up a UFC ring in my yard, we are just going to have the panelists sit next to each other and they're arm length distance away. But the idea here is that we want this to be engaging, and we really would love this to be audience driven if at all possible. I certainly will guide, I'll cross-examine where necessary, and feel free, because this should be like a fun time to just like explore, test, what are you worried about? Like, where do you think a bunch of bullshit's hiding around? Like, this is the panel for that. And we have three very different perspectives on these things, with some friendly similarities and some friendly divergences. And so that's what we're doing here. So we don't have slides for you, gents, but I will turn it over to each of them is going to give us a little bit of an introduction about who they are and their sort of like overall position on AI. And so while they're doing that, think of all your hard questions, like hardest questions. Like, is this a civilizational experiment that we're trying to call a product launch, for instance? Fair game. Okay. All right. So, Ollie, let's start with you.
All right. Can you hear me? Yeah. Cool. So yeah, I'm Ollie Cronk. For those of you that saw my session yesterday, there'll be a bit of sort of repetition, but I've been started my career in computer science academia, did a bit of AI in that degree, and then it was really 2017 I started doing AI properly. That was when I was at one of the big four consultancies. We did a big insurance remediation. So that's classic AI, like pre-generative AI. So yeah, I've been working sort of with applied AI, I suppose, since those days. And so where I am now, I'm here personally rather than for my company, so I won't talk too much about my company. But for the last 5-6 years, I've been running something called Architect Tomorrow, which is a podcast and community, which Selena and other people are involved in. Others are very welcome to come and join in. And I guess in a nutshell, as per my talk yesterday, I look at the sustainability side of things, and I have done since I worked in an energy and environmental consultancy in like the 2005 sort of period. And when I talk about sustainability in AI, I'm not just talking about the environmental side. I think there is a whole cost, business model, continuity, risk. There's a whole bunch of interconnected sustainability things. I think hopefully there's not a huge amount of debate on the panel as to the degree of hype and bubble, how sustainable and how that bubble unwinds and how it becomes BAU and how it becomes leveraged and scaled is, I think, some of the things we'll kind of unpick. But for me, there are some fundamental misalignments between what the technology industry is telling us and trying to get us to buy and the realities, as we all know, as architects of it depends. So one of the things I had on the slide was I'd love to see us moving towards an it depends approach again, because I think for a long time the architects were the custodians of the let's have a sensible sort of pragmatic. Cool. I might just jump up quickly and have a look so I haven't missed. So yeah, I mean, pragmatism for me is this sort of navigating the hype towards value. And the other thing that I think many people are missing is this is very much a brute force technology. Unlike the AI I was talking about in 2017, which was machine learning models, they're actually pretty efficient. We have just thrown compute at something to get emergent behavior out of it. And that emergent behavior is sometimes fooling us into thinking it's more capable than it truly is at scale and sustainably. So there's a whole bunch of bits here to unpack, but I would say This is one of the first technologies that almost sells itself because you can talk to it and it pretends it's a person. That's why I was shaking my head at it's an employee. I have a real issue with the anthropomization of this technology, and it's really dangerous. We need to stop calling it, they or he or she. It's a tool. It's a component of our architectures. It's not an employee. Maybe you can create an architectured solution that is, but anyway, I won't bang on for too long because I'm conscious there are other panelists to introduce and we need to get into the conversation.
Yes, very nice. Thank you. Nick, I have your slide.
I don't have a microphone. Is it?
You're supposed to have one.
You're supposed to have one.
Handheld?
Have one.
I am.
Let's give you this one. You are.
Well, this will work for now. All right. So I'm Nick Malik. I graduated with a degree in artificial intelligence in 1988. So if you want to talk about classic AI, we were doing natural language processing, and we were doing expert systems. In reference to what you just said, absolutely, it's a very different world. The LLMs are a statistical predictive model. They're definitely not logic-based.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny, I came out of college going, I'm going to go do AI for the rest of my life, and there were no jobs. So I did everything else. I did embedded systems. I did product development. I did various different IT roles all the way up through CTO. And these days I'm a fractional CTO, and in addition to being an enterprise architect, and like you, I'm here on my own dime. So, I wanted to be part of this community again. I wanted to kind of get back in touch with the business architecture community. That's why I'm here. But the AI slide of it has just been a kind of a fun twist for me, because my day job is enterprise architect. It's not doing AI. That said, I am doing AI on the side on a business that I'm building. So it's fun, but I'm also recognizing that I have some pretty dark predictions, which I mentioned in a prior presentation just earlier today. So we're going to have some fun talking about what AI might or might not do.
All right. Well,
All right, Chris, to you.
So Chris Armstrong, APG, what my company does is we help organizations adopt modern architecture and engineering methods. And as Selena suggested, I was perhaps part of the instigation of this, where I was basically going, I think AI is kind of stupid. And, to be deliberately provocative. But I also think about it in some ways very narrowly in my domain. So, my participation has been in development of international standards, so been a member of the Open Group, made contributions to TOGAF, Archimate, been a member of the OMG, contributed to formal modeling languages like UML, SysML, UAF, many 3- and 4-letter acronyms, but always focusing on, trying to figure out, how to take the theory, based on idealization, ontology, best practice, and then how do you turn that into something that humans can actually practice at scale and sustain. And I think about my job narrowly, again, defining modeling languages, defining reference models, frameworks, and then helping organizations figure out how to use them. And so, I'm playing Grandpa Simpson here, old man shouts at clouds. But, one of the things that I'm concerned about, and again, might be misunderstanding, I'll be one to admit, just because of how I spend my day and the things that I have to do, I have not used AI for anything, ever. And I'm willing to have my mind changed. I've got some good friends in this community. They're like, you might be full of crap, dude. So I got to show you some things. So I'm open to learning, but I do think we need to be very cautious and deliberate. Namely, I think we really need to take an architecture approach towards thinking about what is this technology, what problems can it solve, which is different than what problems should it solve. Of course, I think a little bit about Dr. Malcolm on Jurassic Park, right? You never stop to think about whether just because you could do it, whether you should do it, right? And so I think about the creative process that's involved and the interactive collaboration with human beings that I think cannot be substituted by anything else. In fact, I would claim that a lot of organizations, one of the reasons they really struggle with the effectiveness and adoption and sustainability of enterprise and business architecture is because of that lack of that human connection. How do I understand, how can I listen to you as a stakeholder, figure out what your problem is, and then how can I do my architecture work with my team to then deliver something that solves your problem and have a good discussion and a dialogue. And, could AI have some role in that? Possibly, but I don't think it's not a panacea. It's not the solution. It's not the thing that's going to suddenly advance this practice in a way that we perhaps hoped it would. And so I think about we need to be looking at what I wrote so I don't remember. We need to be deliberate, skeptical, and guardedly optimistic. As Selena suggests, perhaps like many of you, I've been in this industry for 30 plus years, and I have seen so many different technologies come and go. And a part of my skepticism that might be related to, again, being, I just turned 60 last year, is I've been on the train before, right? So I don't know if any of you guys remember like object-oriented analysis, right? It was going to solve all problems, right? And it doesn't mean that there weren't good things that came out of that have advanced the practice. Case tools. I was all in on case tools, which one could make a claim was that early AI-ish kind of stuff, right? Where we'd never have to program again. We would just build, models. Or you guys remember service-oriented architecture, right? And I just think about how hard vendors pressed these things and made them real and how much money they got customers to spend and how few successes there were and how much carnage there was and to clean up after the fact. And so, getting into my golden years, wanting to be a little guarded and again skeptical and think about something that I put together. And again, thinking about it really narrowly about a lot of the work that I do, which is a little different than, the second part of my job, which is how do I help organizations adopt and embrace these things? And so there might be a play for that. Because, one thing I've thought about is, well, could AI take all of my 30 years of knowledge and create a virtual architect? And I'm not sure if that's a good idea or a bad idea, but hey, maybe if I can make some money and license it. early retirement, but just thinking about how putting together, which I think is an art. What you see here on the lower right is my attempt as trying to abstract TOGAF, BizBach, and ITIL into 6 boxes, and whether it's the right one and it works for you guys, and I'm not necessarily going to spend any time explaining it, but what the motivation for.
Wow.
What's that?
I said that's good because that's not what this panel is about.
But the motivation was one of the things that we often get trouble with in architecture. I think that's been one of our challenges is that we expose implementation details, right? One of the no-nos in object orientation, right? Hide implementation details. We tell too many people about how we do architecture and nobody gives a crap except the people that are doing the architecture. So I tried to create an outcome-driven view of why we do architecture and what people get out of architecture as opposed to how we do it. And the whole point is, could a machine have built that? I don't think so.
All right. So there we have it. Some positions. Do we have any early takers on tough questions for the? Oh my God! This is amazing.
Okay.
I mean, we had carnage. We had dark predictions. We have so much, food for thought.
Should executive leadership teams be driving AI investments right now?
Oh, that's a
goodie.
one. Yeah, I think it depends on how well educated they've been. They don't obviously need to be technical experts, but I think they need to know the 101 on what this technology can and can't do. Otherwise, I think there is a danger they are just chasing the FOMO. We need to be seen by our shareholders to be doing something. I think as long as they're listening to the right experts within the organization, or if you get outside consultants in, sure. Otherwise, I think that's pretty dangerous. It could be a golf club, or who's got the most AI investments. It's dangerous, right? Yeah.
So I think from an investment standpoint, which nails what you just kind of mentioned about what your investors are demanding, differentiation matters in business, right? And if I can stand up and say my business is differentiated because of my novel use of technology A, technology B, right? Then investors care. Most of the time, they don't care about service-oriented architecture or model-driven design. I did, but they don't. But AI has sparked the imagination of the general public. And so investors are driving those ELT members to demand that they respond publicly with, we're investing in AI in some obscure way. So the public side is there. It has to be there, or the investors will just turn around and get pissed off and not give $1 trillion pay package. The downside,
real quick, Nick.
Sorry?
Those investors, do they maybe have a pretty strong portfolio in maybe an AI company or two?
Little self-interest.
There might be some self-interest involved
on that portfolio.
There might be some self-interest involved. But I think the other side of it, and to go to the more cautious side, is that what the ELT might be demanding versus what the ELT is actually expecting to produce can be quite different. And so is there wisdom in an executive leadership team? Well, that depends on the team. But in many cases, especially in well-run companies, they understand that distinction between what they say publicly and what they demand internally. So I think at this point in time, we kind of have to skate that line and hope they get it right.
And, I think you bring up a good point. I mean, like you said, some of these earlier technology trends were not ubiquitous, known by pop culture, right? So things like driverless cars, right? Which may be, a good thing in very controlled circumstances, but a horrible idea, at least given the way that, the transit system works here in the United States. Like, driving country roads at night with deer, with unpredictable terrain. Maybe that's not the best idea. But, I think there will be some interesting, I'm sure, case studies and opportunities, talking about differentiation. Is maybe one of the points of differentiation is not jumping on this bandwagon just because it is, and making investments in your human capital and giving a personal touch to your customers. I think that's a fleeting experience that a lot of people don't have anymore. And so I think there's, again, an opportunity, like the previous people talking about the Thinking About AI paper, being real thoughtful about what are the outcomes that you're hoping out of getting, making this kind of investment. You shouldn't do it, in my opinion, just because the technology exists. It needs to do something that hopefully not just makes your shareholders wealthier, but also makes your customers better satisfied and your employees, willing to make that long-term commitment. Thinking about the kinds of investments that are being made in this technology, maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea to pay for health insurance instead.
Thanks, guys. All right, we have another question over here.
So this might be a me problem, but why do we insist on calling it artificial when the impacts and implications are anything but and incredibly existential in terms of what does it mean to be human?
Yeah, no, 100%. I think, so I've written a whole bunch of pieces over the last 18 months or so. And one of the ones I think that got a lot of traction was the sleepwalking risks that we're not thinking about the real implications of this. Because I think the problem is, I think the virtualization and abstraction of technology in general to the cloud and things like that has allowed people to sort of disconnect from the physical realities of the tech. So it almost feels like this mystical metaverse-y thing. I know we don't have metaverse yet in the way that some have said, but we do have this disconnect, don't we, from physical and virtual. And it almost feels like we have this, this belief that we can do whatever we want in virtual world because we don't see its true impact, particularly in the way. I mean, I appreciate data centers in the US are now starting to impact people and they're starting to kind of get noisy about it. But in general, a lot of the impacts of the technology boom have been felt by the global south. E-waste goes to Africa and it's burned and it's horrendous, right? So and that's just one example of many I could sit here and I don't have time to explain. But this is the thing, there is a real physical cost to our technology, but in the West, we generally don't see it because we just see the benefit of it. We don't see the price that others pay for it. I think with this technology, though, we will probably start to see the disruption it creates will create real stress and tension in our society. And that's something we, I think, as business architects and enterprise architects, need to actually start explaining the consequences of to our stakeholders, so that it's a measured, considered decision, not just that, oh, we can save a bunch of money here and streamline this and do that and the other. It's like, yeah, but at what cost?
So I think to the question of artificial versus intelligence is an interesting one. I really like the way you framed it.
Is it an oxymoron?
I think intelligence is an oxymoron. I think, though, the impacts are very real. And I think you were in my earlier session. I'm the doom and gloom guy, by the way. I'm the one who thinks.
I'm not sure you are. I think you're.
Oh, I'm pretty bad.
Who's more doomy?
I say it with a smile. But I think the impacts are very real, and I think the way people will use artificial intelligence, these analytical tools, they go right to the dark side. And we don't have a cultural understanding or even a governance system, whether I'm talking about the government level or the commercial level or inside of businesses or audit level, any of that, for constraining the use of an analytical tool which is able to do things that a human being would take months or years to do and can do in a few minutes. We don't have any notion of that. Will we see the emergence of business models that are legal but unethical? Absolutely.
Honey.
Honey.
No.
You actually got it. I was wondering if anybody would know about honey.
Hundy, I thought you said.
Honey.
I meant
100%.
like a honey P, 100%.
Oh.
Honey is a browser
like
add-in.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
I was looking forward to that response, actually.
So it's the perfect example of what happens when really, really smart people figure out how to circumvent things legally and immorally, right?
We've been doing that for a long time.
We're really good at it.
Now we can do it faster.
But now not
people.
only can we do it faster, we can have the AI write the code to do it faster. Anyway.
So, I think, based on what you said about consequences in the real world, I know, at least in Wisconsin, where I'm from, across the river, one of the big things that's really starting to affect people, and interesting based on what you were saying, Oliver, about, the benefits of modern technology has helped, manifested itself in the Western world, but the rest of the world perhaps have suffered from it. We're getting, interestingly enough, a lot of NIMBY, not in my backyard responses about data centers.
Yes, we are.
Huge. I mean, I presume the same thing's happening in Minnesota and in other states across the country, where people are like, so what's the consequence of building this 1.6 gigawatt data center in my neighborhood? Environmental, electric rates, all that kind of funky stuff. Water, yep.
Water's a big one.
Yep. And, so one of my concerns is that in there's kind of this gold rush, and of course, a lot of politicians are into it because it's, construction jobs, blue collar stuff, blah, blah, blah. But I have a great fear that we are going to overbuild to, an order of magnitude, possibly. And then what's going to happen? How are those things going to get, decommissioned? But, one little thing I was thinking about, not really related to it, but just, how AI has been a buzzword in culture for some time, right? And I don't know, you guys remember the AI movie by Steven Spielberg?
Yeah.
And I'm like, Steven Spielberg, awesome stuff, right? I took my kids to it when they were younger, like 8 and 10 or something. And if you guys seen the movie, it's a terrifying movie. It's frightening what happens. So,
are you talking about Terminator?
No.
AI.
Oh,
AI.
AI. Okay.
Yeah.
We have a quick follow-up over here, and then I'm going to ask if anyone vehemently disagrees or is in violent agreement with something that is said, who would like to speak after this follow-up.
I think one of the reasons I asked the question is not just in terms of the outcome from these things, but I think of the creative process, the act of struggling to create something.
Interesting.
I'm married to an artist. My kids are artists. So it's very personal. So it's I balance what I do for a living and seeing some of the benefits of things having a conversation with this to assist me. versus something doing that creativity, which to me is inherently human.
Right. Well, and if you don't mind me, I'll jump
Go
in
ahead,
real
please.
quick. That was a part of my pitch as well, is that again, as someone who builds models and tries to think about, the end output is actually not the point. I mean, it's a way that you share, information with the consequences of it, but it's about interacting with people, getting a community of stakeholders together to try to understand a problem. And I think, in building those models incrementally, and an important part of it is making mistakes, because that's how you learn. So if you just put in a prompt and get out a box and line diagram, you just completely subverted the whole process. My other analogy is, again, being a little neo-Luddite here, I was a late adopter of Google Maps, and I'm still a little skeptical. I like paper maps. I'll admit, I just like paper maps.
Do they have those anymore?
But when I'm doing a cross-country voyage, I look at the big paper maps that are 11 by 17, because I want to know where I'm started, and I want to know where I'm going to, and I want to know all the things that are in between. And I need to see that landscape. And then once I do that, my wife, appreciates no longer having to be the navigator, and then I'll set a waypoint. I'm like, oh, we're going to stop at this rock, because that's what we do. We stop at rocks. And we're going to go visit that rock in that, geological formation. So, again, the planning of the voyage, understanding what choices that you had along the way. I think if we just put that all in a machine, it takes away, again, that creative, explorative process.
I want to add something to creativity. Both of my parents were artists, by the way. And I'm the only artist. I'm the only non-artist in my family. It's art has changed in how we use it. If you go back 200 years, art was environmental, it was architectural. We surrounded ourselves with art, but we didn't really use it in our day-to-day lives. Our implements weren't particularly artistic. Over time, art has shifted. We use it more in packaging and in design and in advertising, and less in our environments. Look at this room. Do you see art?
Right.
Most artistic thing in this room is the logo for TCBAF. So I think we've changed the way we see and use creativity. That said, I think we're on the cusp of another shift. Art as a practical use, a lot of that's already shifted to AI. How many of you have seen advertisements that the entire ad was created with AI?
Coca-Cola. Oh, God.
Oh, gosh. They're all over the place. And social media, they dominate. Okay. So we've already started to see that shift. What will happen, because the human side doesn't go away? We need it. We need it to see it, to feel it, but we also need it to express it. Absolutely.
Arts,
We are a creative
humanities,
species.
philosophy. We need all of that.
Yeah.
Can I just do? I mean, the creative bit is clearly, there's lawsuits. There's like Stability AI versus Getty Images rumbling on in the UK court system. But actually, as worrying and problematic as that is, I'm actually more worried about the erosion of critical thinking. Like the fact that you can get shortcut answers. I think Google search is one thing, but you actually had to go and look at the source and read it and figure it out. This is just shortcutting a whole bunch of like important processing steps that we were doing in our minds. And I do worry that the groupthink and doublespeak and all these sort of Orwellian type things are enabled by this technology. So they're talking about the dark side. I think it's very easy to slip into a path where, if we don't have the right frameworks or approaches to using this technology, we do seriously risk eroding critical thinking. And I have a teenage daughter, and I'm trying to kind of get her to not shortcut and use it. She uses it to create quizzes to sort of test her knowledge, which is great to see, rather than just getting it to give her the answer. But I do think that genuinely there are people out there that are just shortcutting processes in a way that they don't realize the sleepwalking risk that they're doing by taking that sort of step.
Well, and I think if we see the impact social media has had on society and how I think
I missed the
humans
plot
have
on that
really
one.
failed that test,
So badly.
that I think we need to be very cautious about how this is going to affect our lives.
You would think that we would have learned from that experience. Okay,
Right.
so I know there's lots of hands here. I promised Steve my next question, but I want to know, is there somebody in here who has like violent disagreement with something that's been said so far? Steve. Oh, okay. Well, then, Steve, we'll let you can have a twofer then.
So I brought Chris into many organizations, Be the Match and API Group, but UHG and AT&T was probably the big one, right? And I'm feeling like he's missing the point of why I brought him in, right? He's a storyteller. And my biggest problem on architects is telling the story. Why do I bring Chris in? Okay, we got TOGAF, we got Archimate, we got some baseline frameworks, right? At AT&T, and I don't know if you know the results, it was 45 developers or architects producing 90 major roadmaps across the organization. We happen to use as tooling and stuff. So what is my challenge behind the scenes? I'm working on that communication. I'm teaching that framework, right? And your skill is telling that story, right? And I want them to architect, dock it, so do it, dock it, and present it. Communicating. It's all about that communication, right? So the violent disagreement is seeing my struggles, why I brought you into those companies, seeing that I'm going to bring you into the next one, Aon. And seeing my problems behind the scenes as you're setting me up, teaching them, right? So I think it should be on the other end, not in being that pessimist, not sure. You should be like embracing it. And I've been selling you that you embrace it. So it's a strange message, damn it.
Yep.
So that's my violent disagreement. Do a 180 quick.
That wasn't a violent disagreement.
Well,
and
I do think, just to, hedge a little bit, there are certain, and so some of the research I'm going to be working on leading up to a presentation hopefully later this month is using, again, architecture thinking to inform this versus just it being an emotional reaction. And so what I'm going to be doing is using the architecture framework, TOGAF, because whether or not you follow TOGAF or not, you are following TOGAF. Because TOGAF is a best practice of enterprise architecture. Whether you use the words or not, doesn't matter. So I'm going to be using that as a neutral reference point and try to say and go through the architecture development method, go through the elements of the architecture repository, go through the governance framework, the practitioner stuff, and say, which of these things legitimately might have some where AI might help. And I can think of some things when I think, because thinking about what I said earlier about we want architects to retain that human connection, collaboration, that storytelling. And I come, as you might guess from my introduction, with standards and modeling language, I come from a tool background. So I do like to use machines to help all this stuff. Well, you know what? I think putting stuff into the tool, maybe there's some ways that could be aided. But I still think the content creation itself needs to be predominantly driven by humans. But there's always been a major barrier towards really leveraging that content, which is how do normal humans interact with it? So, AI might provide a way to get meaningful information out of an architecture repository without having to spend thousands of hours. One of the big things that I think architecture is about is trying to understand the connective tissue across the enterprise, right? And in practice, what that often meant is mapping applications to capabilities, right? Data entities to applications. And it's one thing to do that once, but as many of you may know, that's usually shortly thereafter that it fails because sustaining the investment required to keep that data mapping and correlation current is incredibly difficult. So if there's a place where AI could help free up the architect from not having to do that with a higher level of confidence that the data is good, but of course, right, garbage in, garbage out. The long and short of it, I think there are some value propositions to really help the architect be more focus their time on the human nature of advising people and helping them make better decisions.
Thank you.
So there's I know we talk about creativity being hindered or critical thinking being hindered. I find personally, I can be more creative. I can create much more better storytelling because I'm a terrible PowerPointer. I am. And I can have conceptual ideas that I can feed my AI tool and come up with a great story to tell, which makes it much more easy to, communicate. It allows me to be more creative because I may give it some thought, like these are my ideas and it comes back with reinforcing your ideas or critiquing your ideas or adding substance to your ideas. So I find that it not only allows me to tell a story, but it allows me to be more critical thinker, because it's kind of taking me beyond what I knew, because I am one person, whereas what I get out of the AI tool is, millions and millions of ideas that have been fed into it, right? Is the critical thinking a challenge? Sure. You can get to shortcuts, and then, one of the case studies has been that your neurological connections are going to change of the current generation. The current generation is TikToker, quick responses. They just can't want to kind of think beyond that 5 minutes to talk about that information. So there is going to be neurological changes that are, your neurological connections that are not going to be made, that would have independently made, but that you can say that for any generation. Like if you really look at from a point of time when the cave writers were writing on the cave to the where we are, though that evolution has always been there. It's more about how is the humanity going to adapt it, and how are they going to journey with it. Anyway, that's kind of.
It sounds to me like you're using it in a responsible, human-centric way. My worry is when CEOs go, agentic is this thing, and we don't need you anymore because we'll just extract your knowledge and all the millions of voices on the internet, and then all of a sudden it will make decisions like a human. It's like, no, and no. I mean, like, it can help humans with the content generation or the processing of the content, but the human in the driving seat needs to be that critical expert that understands the case law that it's just come back with has been hallucinated, or actually rather, I prefer confabulation because it's not hallucinating because it's not got a mind, it's confabulating. So yeah, I think what you're describing is like responsible use of it, where you know your limits of knowledge, and therefore if it gives you something that's straying out of your limits of knowledge, you'll hopefully go and fact check that. But unfortunately, there are so many people that aren't using it that way directly, or they are just assuming that a bunch of agents can just take on a whole bunch of work that ultimately needs humans in the driving seat. That's my worry. I think using it to augment yourself and take some ideas and write a story or write a brief or whatever, that's fantastic. What worries me is stretching the tool use and stuff like that beyond the human in the driving seat to like highly regulated, critical, mission critical workloads, where we're just going to all of a sudden assume that something that essentially can assemble words in a way that looks impressive to someone can now all of a sudden start making decisions on its own. It's like, it feels like too much of a stretch to me. Maybe it's middle-aged man talking, maybe I'm doing a little bit shouting at the cloud. And there are interesting models coming along down the line, like worldview models and things like that, which may help with some of the causality, the cause and effect, and physics and real-world understanding. But we don't have those yet. The trouble is, I think the tech companies are already talking like the future's already here. Everyone needs to catch up, and now everyone just needs to roll out agents everywhere, and then they'll capture the market. And if they don't, someone else will. That, for me, is just very dangerously driving us to an arms race in an uncontrolled way that I think will have significant consequences. And I think Chris said earlier, like, one strategy is not to be an early adopter. And it is a strategy, right? You don't have to follow the herd. You can actually go, do you know what? Our business strategy is going to be to continue to be the company that offers the human touch or continues to have the human in the loop, because we actually think that will retain relationships with high value clients or whatever it might be. Because for those of you who heard my talk the other day, enshittification is a real problem here, right? Assuming that this technology can do something a human can will and is leading to enshittification of customer service. So yeah, no, I think the way you're describing it sounds like the way it should be used, quite frankly.
A customer is kind of, it's like the same digital disruption when it happened, where it was more like the organizations kept saying, do I really need digital? Like, I don't see my customer needs. My customer needs my human touch. My customer needs that I'm there on the ground. I need them to be interacting, But the fact was they actually needed it, but they didn't know. Sometimes you have to define what they need, then you being able to define, right? And it's like all the customers are exposed to AI. Like today, I have an Aura ring, that tells me everything that I do, right? AI is in my fingertips. So how do you keep the customer from thinking that this is not important unless you show them how it can be leveraged?
There is the whole, ask someone, and they would have asked for faster horses rather than the car. That whole thing. I get that, right? But I also think I'm seeing a renaissance of human experience. And I think we are polarizing. Unfortunately, the world feels very polarized, and I think we are getting into a position where we have people that would prefer an AI assistant. Well, then that's fine. Maybe you want the AI service. Maybe that's priced differently, different SLA. But there are others that still want that human sort of service. So I think we have to be careful that we aren't designing a bunch of products and services for a specific segment of the market that is on the train, is on board and wants that service. I think as business architects, it's look at those capabilities, look at those value streams and go, what parts of this do I need to offer optionality? Actually, does it make sense to A/B test this, where I will continue to have my existing process and B being generative AI powered, because actually we want to check that this thing isn't just going to go wildly off the guardrails. I was working with a bank, and when we were doing early experimentation, the danger of the financial advisor we were starting to prototype was it was starting to recommend competitor products. So we obviously then create guardrails and other things to stop it doing that. But when you put that into production, you don't know what the next thing it will do, which will embarrass you is. So I do think we just need to be a little bit more that it depends person in the room. And yeah.
All right, we're going to go to the next violent disagreement.
This isn't a violent disagreement, but it's, I lied. I'm sorry. Gentleman in the purple shirt, you called yourself a Luddite.
Yeah.
I know you know the history of that term.
Yep.
And then you talked about the pleasure of doing things by hand with a map that, just like the shuttle, has now been automated by Google Maps. So can you and you all talk us through what you see as the future of the pleasure of doing things by hand? Who gets to do things by hand in future? Who has that luxury? Who does not? Who has the luxury of benefiting, to your point, from things done by hand?
Yeah, interesting question. Really interesting question. One of the things I was thinking about as we were talking, as some of you may know, in some schools in the U.S., maybe it's happening abroad as well, is that they're seriously injecting cursive writing back into secondary education, just because of the tactile experience. So for example, thinking about like Copilot and Teams doing meeting summaries, right? Talk about a complete waste of freaking time. I mean, just think about, and not to say that you guys perhaps haven't found use for them upon occasion, but how many, do you guys ever record your Teams meetings? How many of them have you listened to? Right? So how many petabytes of storage and electricity are being used to capture something that is completely worthless, except maybe Copilot's accessing it, exploiting it. And for me, and again, maybe I'm old-fashioned, so one of the things I was also thinking about as you were talking, I was thinking about expert systems, right? So that's not a new thing, right? That's kind of traditional legacy AI, right? But, it sounds like, one thing to consider is maybe responsible usage of an expert system by an expert is one thing, right? To know when it's hallucinating, or you get something back and you're like, that is not, I just know that is not right, or that's a horrible answer, right? Where other people that might not have that benefit experience wouldn't be able to discern that, right? But again, that tactile experience, just in our day-to-day lives, for me, I am still really old-fashioned. I use a pen on paper. So when I'm taking meeting notes, and for me, and I don't know much about the science behind it or anything, but the fact of writing something down on a piece of paper helps me remember it, whether or not I ever look at it ever again, right? And so, to your question, there's that balancing act of, the scale. That, and to me, the thing that we've seen with industrialization is just velocity, speed. And if we translate that to, agile development, right? And I guess, being, again, kind of pragmatic and practical, just being able to create a crappier product faster is not necessarily a good thing, right? So there's, again, about being deliberate, hands-on, having that kind of feedback. But I think you're getting perhaps to a point which is, because of economies of scale and environment and education, it's not necessarily a level playing field where people have some of those choices that many of us may have.
Can I jump in a little bit too? I think you ask a really good question: is who gets to be creative? Currently, our system, our basically capitalistic system, we're paid to do work. That is the problem. Okay? We're paid to do work, which means that if a computer can do the work, you're not paid. So if we can say that that humanity somehow exceeds the world of you're paid to do work, and we can let the computers do the work, and we can now actually live without that source of revenue for work, basic income, right? Then we can actually get to the point where creative work can be higher valued in some other way, but you don't have to. So I'm looking at a room full of very smart people. Okay. How many of you think you're typical? Do you think you're typical? You're not typical. I'm sorry that you got your AIs at your fingertips and you want to use it to do that. You're not typical. Your daughter is. So is my daughter. Okay. They listen to TikTok and they just kind of want to get through life, and that's fine. The majority of people just want to get through life. They don't feel a need to be creative, or maybe we haven't encouraged them to be creative. Maybe we have a whole society where we tell people don't be creative. But if we don't have to pay people to do work to live, maybe we can build a society where being creative is a self-rewarding mechanism. And that's a very different system than the one we live in today.
I wonder if I can ask you then, like the purpose of AI. What should this be? Efficiency? Human flourishing? Something different?
I think the purpose of humanity is to flourish. So whether AI can support that purpose is a choice we make or don't make. Right now, the choice we make is to make a small number of people extremely wealthy.
And not making that choice is still a choice.
That was
Oliver, do you have one more?
Well, it's kind of, it's
based on productivity.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's the point.
That's the measure.
I think Nick sort of scratched on this, and we start to steer dangerously into sort of political territory here, right? And I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid to go there. But I think unfortunately, if you look at sort of the Luddites were mentioned earlier, right? There was, coming from the UK, where the Industrial Revolution was born. That upset the sort of the model, like the model of society had to sort of be corrected, and the Luddites were obviously smashing the looms and that kind of good stuff. I know Chris and I mentioned that on his podcast a few times. But for me, it's just a moment where we realise the system that we're in is no longer appropriate for the level of technological evolution that we are now at.
Do you think maybe?
So I have a separate talk that I did at Intersection a few years ago. They're an enterprise architecture organization in Europe, and I made the point that we've been through transitions of what's acceptable. So previously we had the slave trade. We abolished that because it wasn't acceptable. We've moved from extractive, exploitative models before. I think we have to be quite brave, and we have to look at what does that next model, because let's face it doesn't feel right now like the current model is particularly working well. It's cracking at the seams, and I think we have to start getting quite creative and looking at what is that future model that distributes the benefits, because otherwise we are just centralizing the benefits to a small number of people, and we had that going on in the UK during the Industrial Revolution, and I'm amazed we still have a monarchy, quite frankly. I don't quite know how that survived. I mean, it didn't for a period. To be fair, it didn't for a period. Oliver Cromwell kind of came in, but then was booted out because he was. So I think that's the challenge we have is, and the danger I think is that to the next point, the people in this room are in a bubble, right? We've talked about a bubble, but we're in a bubble as well because we have an understanding of the technology, we have an understanding of what the implications are. The vast majority of people, they just want life, to Nick's point, they just want life to be easier, they want to pay their bills, etc. And I just don't think many people, if I go back to the sleepwalking point, which is, I do worry we are just sort of mass sleepwalking into something that none of us would ever really vote with our feet to go to, but yeah.
Perhaps we're walking into an invitation to our next evolution where we really remember that human flourishing is the point of us being on this big, beautiful blue dot.
Well, then there's one other viewpoint of human flourishing is that we are a virus, and that by flourishing we're going to destroy everything.
I know, but I don't.
I had to put that in there. Yeah. Sorry.
But we're not a virus, and we know that. We have we have the choice, we have the will. Yeah, yeah. But I appreciate the analogy because boy, doesn't it feel like it right now. Okay, we have another question.
I hope you have Apple TV and you're watching Pluribus, by the way. If you're not, you should watch the first season.
I haven't.
What was that?
I've heard great things about it.
My question was do you think there seems to be a correlation? I admit I'm a little on the skeptic side of the spectrum with AI, but there seems to be a correlation between folks that understand how it works under the covers and that skepticism. A lot of the big AI bulls that I talk to really have no idea what's happening under the covers. And therefore there's a certain amount of like trust and belief in something that they don't understand. And I was interested to get your view on that correlation.
I'm glad, if you don't mind me jumping in quickly.
Please.
I'm glad you brought that up because I think there is a massive bunch of marketing and sales going on right now, right? And there's this golden opportunity to sell a bunch of whole new technologies. And I think that is unfortunately, the understanding just isn't there of what these technologies are and what they can and can't do and what the unintended consequences are. And I think that's the slippery bit for me, is that our system sort of just promotes selling more stuff. It's great. But fundamentally, this is something we need to sort of look at differently and how disruptive it's going to be. So yeah.
No, I think that you're right about the distinction between what we think AI is and what really it is. My biggest concern about that distinction is people do not realize that AI is based upon the data available today on the internet. Mm-hmm. And that data is heavily skewed toward commercial interests, wildly biased,
Western,
extremely Western.
White, male.
Thank you. So yes, all of that. But the thing that also worries me is that creativity is left out. Creativity is wildly overwhelmed by sales and by marketing and by, the cool hot and, where someone has spent a bunch of money to share an idea a gazillion times, which the AI then, sucks in a gazillion times, right? And so it is therefore more important. And so I think we run a very serious risk of ossifying our creative ability to move forward as a species logically, intellectually, philosophically, because we're starting to depend upon and sleepwalk into using something that is basically based upon current knowledge that cannot grow because new ideas can never achieve the level of visibility of a marketing engine.
Right.
All right.
Tell me.
Democratizes creativity 100%. If I had recorded you and played back to somebody who just got their first camcorder and said, oh my gosh, you're going to wreck the movie industry. That's the way you guys are talking, right? I mean, what this does, like she said, it takes something that a creative and allows somebody at some point within the next 3 years, somebody who's got a creative idea is going to develop a movie from beginning to end, right? And they're going to be able to promote their idea without $6 billion from Hollywood in order to do it. They're going to be able to do it with $50 in their basement, which is the progression of technology. Exact opposite. So I would think in the next 3 years, you're going to contact Apple Music, Amazon Music, and you're going to say, I want some country music. I don't want to hear anything commercial. I want it to have this basis. I want it to be like this. I want it to be inspired by this. And you're going to have music.
You can do that.
And does the value go to the platform at that point instead of the artist?
You can do it today.
That is such an edge case. She's so fabulous.
Can I just?
But, and again, to be the Luddite, I mean, is that just make that experience accessible at your fingertips on a device versus going to a school like people used to do for thousands of years, right? And then, the Hollywood, of course, and this is all self-interest directed, right, is pushing back big on this AI stuff because, why do we need actors, right? Right? And I personally believe, the idiosyncrasies of an individual actor, that's what makes a film interesting. The inspiration, the ad-libbing. I'm a musical performer person. And one of the things I like is I still like human curation of playlists. So I listen to this thing called the radio. and in particular, for some of you people that aren't from, this area, the world's best radio station is here in Minneapolis, St. Paul. It's the Current. And they don't always play, the good old songs that I grew up with back in the 80s and 90s, but they're true to their nature. I get a lot of gratification about learning about new music, but then I like performing music. I mean, again, that tactile experience, the way it, the vocal cords resonate, the way it engages, all of us singing monkeys, because that's what I think, we are ultimately. But at the same time, there are people that don't have the benefit of that musical education. They don't have the benefit accessibility of these musical instruments. So, can this make some of that experience, approachable to some of those that don't have it? Sure. But if they have access to it, it's true. Everybody will.
We have one more.
Yeah.
Time here, which is extraordinary.
And hey, we can talk more about this once the alcohol flows later.
Yeah. I got even more spicy.
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah, you think we're spicy now.
I think my comment is a little bit maybe shorter ranged. I know a lot of the stuff we've been talking about is where is this ultimately going? But I think that we're at a time in history that's a little bit unique. Every generation is born the same. We all go through these phases of development, and the young people today are born the same way that young people were born before. But now the technology is ratcheting, right? It's accumulating knowledge from the past, but people aren't born with accumulated knowledge. No one inherits wisdom.
Unless they're Bene Gesserit. But.
Right. And so I think the manipulation that's going to happen here is going to be very interesting in the near future. I think that maybe our next election, we're going to see some videos that are generated by AI that look real, that are going to manipulate how people vote. I think that that we have to be careful and protect the next generation from the power of this manipulation, because we're all hardwired that what I see is true.
Yeah.
Right. I'm an eyewitness. If I bear false witness, why is that a big deal? Because someone said they saw it, which means it was real. It really happened. But now you saw it doesn't mean anything. But people who are the new generation don't know that, right? So I think that that's a cautionary tale for the near future in accordance with the prophecy.
I know we're almost at time.
All right,
but
yeah,
can
quick
I just
reaction.
Quickly, so I think in response to what you were saying up front, there are some academic papers that are well worth checking out. Like one of them is model collapse. Like the more the internet gets trained on synthetic data, the more it starts to degenerate into garbage. There are some academic challenges to some of the marketing. With the best respect, it sounds like you're sold, and that's great that you're sold on the Kool-Aid. But I would just suggest you look at some other research that suggests that actually some of what the claims are, and I think it's the privilege. It's recognizing the privilege that we're in. So people in this room have access to technology now. We are actually just making that gulf of digital divide even worse, and that's one of the things. So there's a bunch of things if you're interested in having the other view, and I think a spicy debate over alcohol sounds amazing. Hopefully it stays verbal and not physical, because
Fighting.
Genuinely, that's why I come around and do talks to different places. That's why I come over here, because I think the marketing machine is doing an amazing job. And yes, there are some amazing potential, but we also need to look at what the downsides are as well.
Thank you guys so much. I hope that this conversation continues. Please pressure test these things. These kinds of dialogues are so important for us to surface the issues, to understand things differently, to get out of our own perspectives. So let's bring the heat. Absolutely no violence. Thank you three very, very much.
This was fun.